Imagine this. You're standing in your own driveway, minding your own business, when sirens scream down your street and two cop cars screech to a halt, lights blazing like you're the star of a crime thriller. All because you dared to build a deck in your backyard, a deck that followed every rule to the letter. But the real kicker? The HOA dictator who called 911 to have you hauled away had no clue my daughter was one of the officers stepping out of that cruiser, ready to turn her petty power trip into a public meltdown. Let me paint you a picture that'll make your blood boil and keep you wondering just how far this suburban tyrant would go to crush me. The afternoon sun draped Oak Ridge meadows in a golden haze, the kind of light that makes suburban streets look like postcard promises of peace. Sycamore Lane was quiet, save for the faint buzz of a neighbor's leaf blower and the rhythmic clink of my wrench as I tinkered with a carburetor in my garage. I'm Robert Jenkins, a retired mechanic who spent 35 years fixing engines and dodging shop politics, now trying to enjoy the quiet life in a cozy bungalow. The smell of motor oil and cedar shavings filled the air, a comforting mix that grounded me as I worked on a '67 Mustang part for a buddy's restoration project. Then, like a thunderclap in a clear sky, sirens ripped through the calm, sharp, urgent, and way too close. I dropped the wrench, the metal clanging against the concrete floor, and stepped onto the driveway, wiping my hands on a rag that smelled faintly of gasoline. Two police cruisers had parked crookedly in front of my house, their red and blue lights pulsing like a heartbeat, casting eerie shadows on the white siding of my home. Exhaust fumes curled into the air, mingling with the crisp scent of autumn leaves. Neighbors' curtains twitched. Mrs. Callahan across the street, old Mr. Peterson with his garden hose, everyone drawn to the spectacle. And there, storming toward the officers like a hurricane in heels, was Brenda Hargrove, the HOA president who'd made it her mission to rule Oak Ridge Meadows like her personal kingdom. Brenda was 50, with platinum blonde hair shellacked in place, and a blazer so crisp it could have been ironed by a military drill sergeant. Her heels clicked on the asphalt like a metronome of doom, and she clutched a clipboard stacked with papers that fluttered in her trembling grip. "Arrest him!" she shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch that could crack crystal, pointing a manicured finger at my backyard. "That man's deck is a disgrace, a violation of our community's sacred standards. He's destroying everything we've built here." I stood there, rag dangling from my hand, staring at the cedar deck I'd built last summer, a modest 4-foot platform for grilling and stargazing, fully permitted, inspected, and compliant with every HOA bylaw I'd memorized. I'd spent weeks researching, getting quotes, ensuring every plank met the city's code and the HOA's rules down to the exact shade of stain. But Brenda wasn't pointing at a code violation, she was pointing at me, her eyes blazing with a fury that felt personal, almost unhinged. "That deck," she continued, waving her papers like a prosecutor in a courtroom drama, "is a hazard to our aesthetic harmony. It's illegal, unsafe, and a direct attack on our property values." The lead officer stepped out of the cruiser, his boots crunching on the gravel I'd laid to spruce up the driveway. He was tall, with a jawline that could cut glass, and a hand resting casually on his radio, like he'd seen this kind of neighborhood nonsense 100 times. Brenda was in full performance mode now, her voice rising as she thrust her clipboard toward him, reciting a litany of invented infractions. "He's been defying the board for months, undermining our authority, encouraging chaos," she declared, her face flushed redder than the maple leaves littering the lawn. I leaned against the garage doorframe, folding my arms. Aesthetic harmony? The HOA rulebook, 50 pages of fine print I'd read twice, had no such clause. Brenda was making it up, as she often did, crafting rules to suit her whims. For 6 years, she'd reigned as HOA president, unopposed because no one else wanted the job. Her reign was built on petty tyranny, fines for grass too long, mailboxes too colorful, Christmas lights too bright. But calling the cops over a deck that passed every inspection? This wasn't just overreach, it was a declaration of war. The lead officer adjusted his sunglasses, glancing at the deck barely visible over the fence, its clean lines and sturdy posts mocking Brenda's accusations. Then he turned toward me, and a stern expression cracked into a familiar grin. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice warm but professional, cutting through Brenda's rant like a beacon in a storm. "What's the problem here?" The air seemed to freeze. Brenda's jaw dropped, her clipboard slightly slipping as her eyes darted between me and the officer. My daughter, Emily Jenkins, 32, a detective with the county sheriff's department. Her uniform was crisp, her badge catching the fading sunlight, and the smirk on her lips told me she was savoring this moment. Brenda's face drained of color, going from crimson to ghostly white faster than a car shifts gears. This is a conflict of interest," she stammered, clutching her papers like a shield. You're her daughter? I demand another officer." Emily crossed her arms, her badge glinting as she stepped closer. "Mrs. Hargrove," she said, her tone calm but edged with steel, "you called 911 claiming a serious community violation and a threat to safety. I need specifics, because right now I see a permitted deck and a lot of yelling. Misusing emergency services is a felony, so let's get this straight." Brenda's eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The second officer, a younger guy with a buzz cut, scribbled in his notepad, barely hiding a grin. Neighbors were openly watching now. Mrs. Callahan waved from her porch. Mr. Peterson abandoned his garden hose to gawk. Brenda's performance was unraveling, and the audience wasn't on her side. She shuffled her papers, muttering about board authority and community standards, but her voice lacked conviction, drowned out by the hum of the cruiser's engines and the growing murmur of the crowd. Emily took a step toward the deck, inspecting it with a practiced eye. "Dad, this the deck she's talking about?" she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. I nodded, tossing the rag onto a workbench. "Built it last summer. Permits, inspections, all by the book. She's been after it ever since." Emily turned back to Brenda, her smirk gone, replaced with the no-nonsense look she'd honed breaking up bar fights and interrogating petty thieves. "Mrs. Hargrove, I'm going to need to see the specific rule this deck violates, and I'd suggest you choose your words carefully." The tension was palpable, the air thick with exhaust and the faint scent of cedar from the deck. Brenda's hands trembled, her clipboard a flimsy defense against the reality crashing down. She'd called the cops to intimidate me, to flex her HOA muscle, but she hadn't counted on Emily, my Emily who had inherited her mother's heart and my stubborn refusal to bow to bullies. The neighbors' whispers grew louder, their curiosity a living thing, feeding on Brenda's faltering composure. But as the cruisers idled and Brenda scrambled for an excuse, a question burned in my mind, hot and insistent. Why was she so obsessed with my deck? I'd followed every rule, crossed every T, and here she was, risking legal trouble to take me down. What was Brenda Hargrove hiding that made a few cedar planks worth calling 911? Was it just her ego, or was there something darker, something bigger, lurking behind her clipboard and her fake rules? As I watched her stammer under Emily's gaze, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't about a deck. This was personal, and whatever Brenda was protecting, I was going to find out. That night, as the sirens faded and I sat in my quiet house, Whiskers purring at my feet, I grabbed a notebook and started writing. Every word Brenda said, every paper she waved, every glare she shot my way, it was all evidence. Emily's warning echoed. "Document everything, Dad. She's done this before." "Done what? Harassed neighbors?
abused power, or something that could unravel her entire empire? The coffee maker hissed, its bitter aroma filling the kitchen as I scribbled, the weight of the fight settling in. Sycamore Lane was no longer just my street, it was a battleground, and Brenda had just fired the first shot. What was she so desperate to hide, and how far would she go to keep it buried?
You ever buy into a dream so perfect it feels like a betrayal when it turns sour? That's what Oak Ridge Meadows was supposed to be for me and Lisa. Quiet haven where we could retire, sip coffee on a porch swing, and watch fireflies dance under summer stars. Instead, I'm standing in my kitchen, staring at a violation notice from Brenda Hargrove, the HOA tyrant who called the cops on me yesterday over a deck that's legal as Sunday prayer. Her scribbled threat, $400 daily fines for aesthetic disharmony, sits on the counter, mocking the life Lisa and I built here. But the real sting? Knowing Brenda's not just after my deck, she's after the memories this house holds. And I'm starting to wonder what kind of secrets she's guarding that make her so hell-bent on breaking me. The morning after the sirens shook Sycamore Lane, I woke to the familiar quiet of my bungalow. The kind that feels too heavy without Lisa's humming to fill it. I'm Robert Jenkins, 63, a retired mechanic who spent 35 years wrenching engines in a noisy auto shop, dodging grease stains and shop politics. 2 years ago, Lisa and I sank our savings into this place. $1,500 a year in HOA dues for neat lawns, a community pool we never swam in, and a promise of peace. Oak Ridge Meadows was Lisa's dream. Safe streets where kids could bike, flower beds she'd tend with her green thumb, a porch where we'd grow old together. But last fall, a heart attack stole her faster than a spark plug misfire, leaving me with our tabby cat, Whiskers, and a house that still smells faintly of her lavender candles in the bathroom. I poured coffee, the bitter steam curling up from Lisa's favorite mug, and stared out the kitchen window. The cedar deck, cause of yesterday's police showdown, gleamed in the morning light, its sturdy planks a testament to my stubborn need to hold on to something solid after Lisa's death. My kids, Emily, 32, the cop who shut down Brenda's 911 stunt, Mike, 28, a high school teacher with Lisa's patience, and Sophie, 24, a law student with my knack for sniffing out nonsense, kept pushing me to sell. "Move closer to us, Dad," Emily said last month, her voice soft over the phone. "This place is too big for you and Whiskers." But how do you leave a house where every creak of the floorboards echoes your wife's footsteps? Where's her rose bushes still bloom like she's watering them herself? The HOA didn't seem like a problem when we moved in. The rules were simple. Keep your grass short, no neon paint, no boats in the driveway. Basic neighborly stuff I'd followed without blinking. But Brenda Hargrove, the self-appointed queen of Oak Ridge Meadows, had other ideas. 6 years as HOA president, unopposed because who'd want that thankless job, had turned her into a suburban dictator. She was 50, drove a Mercedes SUV with HOA queen plates, and lived in a McMansion with her accountant husband, Victor, who signed her violation notices with a flourish. Brenda's hobby wasn't gardening or book clubs, it was power, wielded through a clipboard and an endless supply of made-up rules. It started small, before the deck fiasco. Last spring, she'd fined me $50 for leaving my garbage can out an hour past pickup. Never mind that her own cans sat curbside all day. Then came a $100 penalty for unauthorized roses in my front yard, the ones Lisa planted, claiming they were too vibrant for community standards. I paid the fines, gritting my teeth, because I wasn't ready to fight while grieving Lisa. But the deck? That was my line in the sand. I'd built it for her, a place to sit and watch the stars like we used to, and Brenda's crusade to tear it down felt like an attack on Lisa's memory. Yesterday's siren show replayed in my mind as I sipped my coffee, Whiskers weaving around my ankles with a lazy purr. Brenda's meltdown, Emily's smirk, the neighbors' curious stares. It was all too much for a quiet Tuesday.
I pulled out the HOA rule book, its pages dog-eared from my obsessive checks, and flipped to the section on decks. Structures under 5 feet require no board approval provided city permits are obtained. I had the permits, the inspections, the receipts, everything. So why was Brenda so obsessed? Why call the cops over a few planks of cedar? Emily's words from last night echoed. Document everything, Dad. She's done this before. Done what? Harassed neighbors until they broke? Or something shadier, something tied to the way her husband's signature appeared on every fine. I stepped onto the deck, the wood creaking softly under my boots, and ran my hand along the railing. Lisa would have loved this. String lights looped around the posts, a grill in the corner, the smell of charcoal in summer evenings. Across the street, Mrs. Callahan was watering her geraniums, giving me a knowing nod. She'd whispered yesterday, as the cruisers pulled away, "Brenda's been after my porch swing too. You're not alone." Not alone? That sparked something. If Brenda was targeting others, maybe there was a pattern, a reason she was so desperate to control every inch of Oak Ridge Meadows. The violation notices on the counter caught my eye again, Brenda's handwriting sharp and angry. Comply within 72 hours or face escalated penalties. Escalated how? More fines? More cops? Or something worse? I grabbed a notebook, the same one I'd started last night, and jotted down the details. Brenda's rant, the false 911 call, the neighbors' reactions. My years in the shop had taught me one thing. When a boss starts throwing their weight around, it's usually to cover something up. Brenda wasn't just a control freak. She was scared. But scared of what? A retired mechanic who just wanted to grill in peace? Or something buried deeper in her HOA empire? As Whiskers leapt onto the windowsill, his tail flicking at a passing butterfly, I felt a resolve harden. This house, this deck, these memories? They were mine, and no clipboard-wielding tyrant was going to take them away. But Brenda's desperation was a puzzle, and I was starting to think the pieces were hidden in her rules, her fines, maybe even her accountant husband's shady accounting. What was she protecting that made a simple deck worth a police standoff? And how many others in Oak Ridge Meadows were fighting her in silence? The coffee grew cold in my mug, but the fire in my gut was just getting started. Brenda Hargrove had picked the wrong widower to mess with, and I was ready to find out why.
What kind of person turns the backyard deck into a declaration of war? The kind who calls the cops over cedar planks, that's who. After Brenda Hargrove's 911 stunt on Sycamore Lane, I thought she'd back off, humiliated by my daughter Emily shutting down her fake emergency. But Brenda wasn't the type of retreating. That deck, my tribute to Lisa, built to hold memories of her laughter under starlit skies, had become her personal crusade. And she was coming for it with a vengeance that made my mechanic's gut scream, "This isn't just about rules." What's Brenda hiding that makes 4 feet of wood a threat to her empire? And how many neighbors are watching, waiting to see who breaks first? The morning after the sirens, I stood on that deck, coffee mug in hand, the bitter aroma mixing with the fresh cedar scent that still lingered from last summer's build. The wood was smooth under my fingers, each plank a promise I'd made to Lisa before her heart gave out. A spot for us to grill, sip wine, maybe dance to her old jazz records. I'd spent weeks on it, pulling permits, checking HOA bylaws, getting 3 contractor bids to keep it under budget. The rule book was clear. Decks under 5 feet needed no approval, and mine clocked in at 4 feet, city inspected and signed off on. But Brenda Hargrove didn't care about rules unless she wrote them herself. I was screwing in a loose railing bolt when the familiar click-click of designer heels echoed from the sidewalk. Brenda materialized like a storm cloud in stilettos, her platinum hair glinting in the sun, clipboard clutched like a weapon. Her perfume, some cloying floral assault, hit me before her words did. "Robert Jenkins," she announced, her voice sharp enough to cut through steel. "Your deck is a violation of our community's aesthetic unity clause. You have 72 hours to dismantle it or face $500 daily fines." She slapped a violation notice onto my mailbox, the paper crisped with her husband's Victor's accountant's signature, as if that made her nonsense official. I straightened, wiping sweat from my brow, the wrench still in my other hand. "Aesthetic unity clause?" I said, keeping my tone even despite the heat rising in my chest. "Show me where that's written, Brenda." I'd read the HOA bylaws cover to cover, 50 pages of jargon, and no such clause existed. Her eyes narrowed, lips pursing like she'd bitten a lemon. "The HOA interprets the rules as needed," she snapped, "and I'm the board." She stepped closer, her heels grinding into the gravel I'd laid, her gaze flicking to the deck like it personally insulted her. I pulled out my phone, showing her the permit, the inspection report, the bylaw screenshot I'd saved. "Decks under 5 feet are fine, Brenda. I've got the paperwork, you've got nothing but a clipboard and a grudge." Her nostrils flared, and for a moment I thought she'd stomp her foot like a cartoon villain. Instead, she scribbled something on her clipboard and hissed, "This isn't over, Jenkins." She turned on her heel, leaving a cloud of perfume and menace as she marched back to her Mercedes, HOA Queen plates gleaming like a taunt. That afternoon, I walked the neighborhood, the crunch of fallen leaves under my boots matching the churn in my mind. Brenda's obsession wasn't random. She'd ignored the Hendersons' towering gazebo, the Malones' garish fountain. Why my deck? I stopped by Mrs. Callahan's porch, where she was pruning her geraniums, the sharp snip of her shears punctuating her words. "She's been after my swing, too," she muttered, glancing at Brenda's McMansion down the street. "Fined me $75 for excessive motion. She's unhinged, Robert." Mr. Peterson, watering his roses, chimed in. "Got a $100 ticket for my bird bath. Said it was too reflective. You're not alone." Not alone. Those words sparked something. If Brenda was targeting others, maybe there was a pattern, a reason she was so desperate to control every inch of Oak Ridge Meadows. I knocked on the Malone's door, their fountain gurgling like a defiance of Brenda's rules. Tom Malone, a retired firefighter, leaned against his porch railing, his voice low. "She's been snapping photos of my kids' bikes, claiming they're clutter. I paid $200 to shut her up." His wife Linda added, "Her husband's firm gets a cut of every fine. Smells like a racket to me." A racket? That word stuck like grease on a piston. I dug through my notebook, where I jotted down the siren incident, Brenda's false 911 call, Emily's warning, "She's done this before." Now Linda's comment lit a fuse. Was Brenda's crusade about control, or was she and Victor skimming dues and fines for their own gain? I checked the HOA budget, online public for residents, but I'd never looked closely. The numbers were vague. $30,000 for common area maintenance, $15,000 for administrative fees. No receipts, no details. Victor's accounting firm was listed as the manager. Convenient. By dusk, Brenda was back, her SUV idling as she snapped photos of my deck from the street, her camera flashing through the twilight. Whiskers, lounging on the porch, flicked his tail, oblivious to her surveillance. I grabbed my own phone, recording her from the window. If she wanted a war, I'd learned one thing from 35 years in the shop: document everything. A union buddy once saved his job with a single time-to-stock photo of a foreman's mistake. Brenda's daily patrols, her fake rules, every click of her heels was evidence. But as the stars emerged, mirroring the string lights I'd hung on the deck for Lisa, a chill settled. Brenda's escalation, from fines to cops to obsessive stakeouts, wasn't just petty. It felt desperate, like she was guarding something bigger than her ego. Was it money, power, or something buried in those vague HOA budgets? Emily's voice rang in my head. Document everything. I added Brenda's latest visit to my notebook, the scent of cedar lingering as I wrote. The deck was my stand, but it was also a spark. How many neighbors would join me if I pushed back? And what would Brenda do when she realized I wasn't backing down?
Ever put up a string of Halloween lights to chase away the gloom, only to have someone try to snuff out your joy with a clipboard and a vendetta? That's what Brenda Hargrove did when I hung a few orange LEDs to honor Lisa's love for the season, turning my modest glow into her latest battleground. After her failed 911 stunt over my deck and weeks of fake fines, I thought she'd take a breather. Instead, she doubled down, her HOA reign transforming Sycamore Lane into a war zone of invented rules. But when 10 houses lit up in defiance one chilly October night, I realized I wasn't fighting alone, and Brenda's desperation was starting to crack open secrets she'd kill to keep buried. What was she so afraid of that a few pumpkins could set her off? October in Oak Ridge Meadows carried the crisp bite of autumn, the air thick with the scent of fallen leaves and chimney smoke. I stood on a ladder, stringing orange and purple lights along the eaves of my bungalow, each bulb a nod to Lisa, who turned Halloween into a warm celebration with her carved pumpkins and candy bowls. The deck, still standing despite Brenda's $500 daily fine threats, gleamed in the backyard, a quiet rebellion against her tyranny. Since the sirens, I'd kept a notebook, documenting her every move, spurred by Emily's warning, "She's done this before." Brenda's deck obsession and whispers of a financial racket had me on edge. What was she hiding? I'd barely clipped the last light when the unmistakable click-click of Brenda's heels cut through the evening quiet. She stood at the end of my driveway, her Mercedes idling with HOA Queen plates glinting under the streetlights, clipboard in hand like a judge's gavel. Her perfume, a floral assault that could choke a beehive, wafted over as she barked, "Robert Jenkins, those lights violate our dark sky preservation policy. Excessive illumination disrupts community harmony." Her voice hit a shrill pitch, making Whiskers, my tabby, flatten his ears from the porch. I climbed down, the ladder creaking, and faced her. "Dark sky policy," I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Show me the rule, Brenda." I'd scoured the HOA bylaws, 50 pages of bureaucratic drivel, and found nothing about Halloween lights. Her eyes narrowed, lips pursing like she'd sucked a sour candy. "It's under review by the board," she snapped, handing me a violation notice for $200 daily fines, Victor's accountant's signature scrawled at the bottom. Another made-up rule, just like the deck's aesthetic disharmony. But her hands shook as she thrust the paper at me, a flicker of panic in her gaze. Why was she so rattled? I glanced at the Malone's house 2 doors down, their yard a Halloween extravaganza, skeletons, fog machines, a glowing witch that could be seen from orbit. Across the street, the Hendersons had inflatable ghosts bobbing in the breeze. My lights, a simple string of LEDs, warm and understated, like Lisa's smile. "Excessive compared to what?" I asked, nodding at the neighborhood's glow. Brenda's jaw tightened, but she didn't answer, scribbling furiously on her clipboard before stalking back to her SUV. That night, I texted 5 neighbors, Mrs. Callahan, the Malones, Mr. Peterson, and the Garcias, forming what I jokingly called the Sycamore Resistance, inspired by neighbor whispers. "Brenda is targeting my lights now," I wrote. "Anyone else hit? Let's sync our displays Friday at 7 p.m. The replies flooded in. Mrs. Callahan's porch swing had a $75 light pollution fine. The Garcia's jack-o'-lanterns were deemed visually aggressive, $150. Tom Malone texted, "She's after our witch, $200. Victor's firm gets 10% of every fine. Follow the money, Robert." Follow the money. Linda Malone's words echoed, tying to my suspicions about Victor's shady accounting. I dug into the HOA's online budget again. $15,000 for seasonal oversight, with no breakdown, all funneled through Victor's firm. Was Brenda's light crusade a distraction from something bigger? I added her latest notice to my notebook, now thick with entries. The 911 call, deck fines, neighbor complaints. My shop days taught me, when a foreman pushes too hard, they're hiding a screw-up. Friday night arrived, the sky a deep indigo, stars peeking through wisps of clouds. At 7 p.m. sharp, 10 houses on Sycamore Lane blazed to life. Orange lights, glowing pumpkins, even a synchronized skeleton dance at the Garcias. Kids laughed, neighbors clapped, the air alive with cider and defiance.
I stood on my porch, Whiskers purring at my feet, watching the glow reflect off Brenda's Mercedes as it screeched around the corner. She slammed on the brakes, her face visible through the windshield, pure constipated rage. She couldn't find us all without admitting she'd singled me out, and her own house, dripping with icicle lights, mocked her dark sky nonsense. But as the neighborhood cheered, a chill crept in. Brenda's SUV lingered, her silhouette snapping photos from the driver's seat. Why was she so desperate to control every bulb, every plank? Was it just her ego, or was she protecting a scheme that needed us distracted? Emily's voice rang in my head. She's done this before. Done what? Skimmed fines? Or something that could bring her whole HOA castle crashing down? I grabbed my phone, recording her surveillance, the flash of her camera a beacon in the Halloween glow. This wasn't just about lights. It was a war, and Brenda had just raised the stakes.
What kind of monster declares war on a cat who's never hurt a soul? Brenda Hargrove, that's who. The HOA dictator who'd already tried to bury me under fines for my deck and Halloween lights. When she targeted Whiskers, my lazy tabby who naps on the porch and chases snowflakes, I knew this wasn't just about rules. It was personal. After the sirens and our glowing Halloween rebellion, I thought Brenda might slink back to her McMansion, licking her wounds. Instead, she unleashed a new scheme, a leash law, that smelled like another scam to bleed us dry. But when I caught her breaking her own rules on camera, I started to wonder, what's she so desperate to hide that even a cat's sunbath threatens her empire? Winter rolled into Oak Ridge Meadows like a slow-moving storm, the air sharp with frost and the scent of pine from Christmas wreaths popping up on doors. My deck, still standing despite Brenda's threats, was dusted with snow, its string lights tucked away after our Halloween victory. The Sycamore Resistance group chat buzzed with updates. Mrs. Callahan's $75 fine for her porch swing lights, the Garcia's $150 penalty for aggressive pumpkins. Proof Brenda was targeting anyone who dared shine. My notebook, filled with the siren incident and suspicions of Victor's accounting, now held a growing list of her fake rules. Emily's warning echoed. She's done this before. But what? I was shoveling snow off the driveway, the crunch of my boots matching the rhythm of my thoughts, when Brenda's Mercedes rolled by, HOA Queen plates glinting under the streetlights. She didn't stop, but her camera flash did, snapping photos of Whiskers lounging on the porch, his orange fur a bright spot against the snow. By noon, a violation notice was taped to my door, Brenda's handwriting sharp as a blade. Unleashed feline menace endangering community safety. $350 fine plus mandatory behavioral assessment, $400. Comply within 48 hours. Whiskers? The cat who slept 18 hours a day and whose biggest crime was stealing a sock? I laughed, but the chill in my gut wasn't from the January cold. I stormed to the HOA rulebook, its pages worn from my constant checks. No pet policy required leashes for cats, only dogs. And even then, only when unsupervised. Whiskers never roamed beyond my yard, always under my watch. Brenda's notice cited a community safety addendum, another invented rule, like the deck's aesthetic unity clause and dark sky policy. I called Mrs. Callahan, who joined the resistance after the deck war. She hit my poodle with a $200 barking violation last week, Robert. During a snowstorm, my dog was inside. Tom Malone texted, our lab got a $300 aggressive posturing fine for wagging his tail. Victor's firm takes 15% of every penalty. That 15% again. Linda Malone's hint about Victor's cut fueled my suspicions about the vague HOA budget. $15,000 for administrative fees. Was Brenda's pet patrol a cash grab to fund their scheme? I installed 2 security cameras that afternoon, my mechanic's hands steady from wiring shop alarms. One faced the porch, one the yard. Legal, on my property, motion activated, cloud backed. By morning, they paid off. Footage showed Brenda trespassing at dawn, measuring Whiskers' water bowl, snapping photos of his leash, clipped to the porch rail. But the real gem? Her yappy terrier Rufus roaming free, digging up the Garcia's garden while she ignored it. I showed the footage to the resistance group at the Malone's house, the smell of hot cocoa mixing with the tension around their dining table. Linda, a paralegal, leaned forward. "This is harassment, Robert. Filing false complaints is illegal, especially if she's targeting multiple neighbors." Mr. Peterson nodded, his hands wrapped around a mug. "She cited my goldfish for uncontained aquatic risk. $150. I don't even have a pond." Laughter broke the mood, but the pattern was clear. Brenda was weaponizing fake pet rules, and Victor was cashing in. I texted Emily, who'd shut down Brenda's 911 call. "Can you check if she's filed pet complaints with animal control?" Emily replied, "On it, Dad. Keep those cameras rolling." That night, Brenda's SUV circled again, her flash catching Whiskers napping. I recorded it, adding to my notebook, now a chronicle of her desperation. Why target a cat? Was it to break me or to distract from the financial secrets Linda's comment hinted at? As snow fell, blanketing the deck, I felt Lisa's strength in me. Brenda's leash law was a trap, but my cameras were a net. What would she do when she realized I was catching her every move?
What kind of HOA dictator demands you rip up a perfectly good driveway just to line her pockets? Brenda Hargrove, that's who. The woman who called the cops over my deck, fined my Halloween lights, and tried to leash my cat, Whiskers. After our glowing neighborhood rebellion exposed her hypocrisy, I thought she'd retreat. Instead, she rolled out a new scam disguised as a pavement perfection protocol, demanding thousands for unnecessary resurfacing. But when I rallied neighbors to fight back with eco-friendly pavers, I caught a glimpse of her real game, and it wasn't just about control. What was Brenda so desperate to hide that she was paving over our wallets to keep it buried? Spring arrived in Oak Ridge Meadows with the muddy scent of melting snow and the promise of renewal. But Brenda's tyranny cast a shadow over Sycamore Lane. My deck, still standing despite her $500 fines, was dusted with pollen, its string lights stored away after our Halloween victory. Whiskers, targeted by Brenda's fake leash law, lounged on the porch, his orange fur catching the morning sun. My notebook, started after the police showdown and thickened with suspicions of Victor's accounting, now held a growing tally of Brenda's attacks, deck fines, light penalties, pet violations, all tied to Victor's firm taking 10 to 15% of every fine. Emily's warning, "She's done this before," rang louder each day. I was patching a small crack in my driveway, the asphalt warm under my hands from years of Michigan winters, when Brenda's Mercedes cruised by, HOA Queen plates gleaming like a challenge. By noon, a notice was taped to my mailbox, her handwriting sharp as ever. Pavement Perfection Protocol mandates resurfacing with approved materials by May 15th, non-compliance, $250 daily fines. The attached list demanded exotic asphalt from 3 vendors, each charging $3,000 minimum, double the market rate, and unsuitable for our rainy climate. My driveway was functional, its cracks minor. Why this sudden mandate? I flipped through the HOA bylaws, now tattered from constant use, and found no mention of driveway standards beyond maintain good condition. Another fake rule, like the deck's aesthetic unity clause, the dark sky policy, and the leash law addendum. I called Tom Malone, the retired firefighter from our resistance group. "Got the same notice," he growled. $3,200 quote from her vendor. "My driveway's fine." Mrs. Callahan texted, $2,800 for my gravel path. Brenda's insane. Linda Malone, the paralegal, added, "Victor's firm manages these vendors. Follow the money." That phrase again? I dug into the HOA budget online. $20,000 for infrastructure enhancements. No receipts, all through Victor's firm. A racket was taking shape, each fine and mandate funneling cash to Brenda's husband. But this time, I had an idea. My mechanic days taught me to spot contractor scams, overpriced parts, unnecessary work. The city offered rebates for permeable pavers, eco-friendly tiles that let rainwater soak through, perfect for our climate. Cost? $500 after rebates versus Brenda's $3,000 scam. I pitched a bulk buy cooperative to the resistance at the Garcia's house, the smell of fresh tamales mixing with the hum of defiance. 10 neighbors showed, Mrs. Callahan, Mr. Peterson, the Malones, others stung by Brenda's Birkfines. We order pavers together, split the cost, install ourselves, I said, spreading city rebate forms on the table. It's legal, cheap, and screws Brenda's vendors. Linda nodded, her paralegal mind clicking. Her mandate violates city stormwater rules. Those asphalt mixes are banned for runoff issues. Mr. Peterson, a retired engineer, grinned. Her own driveway's non-compliant. I saw our sprinklers flooding it last week. We ordered 500 pavers, cutting costs to $400 per house. The next weekend, Sycamore Lane became a construction party. Neighbors hauling tiles, sharing shovels, laughing over lemonade. The clink of tools and chatter drowned out the memory of Brenda's sirens. My driveway transformed, its gray tiles gleaming like a middle finger to her rules. Whiskers watched from the porch, unbothered by the noise, his leash clipped for show. Brenda struck back Monday, storming my yard in her heels, clipboard shaking. "This paving violates aesthetic standards," she shrieked, Victor trailing her, his accountant tie flapping. "Approved vendors only." I smiled, handing her the city's rebate approval. "Check the law, Brenda. Your asphalt's illegal." Her face reddened, but Victor's nervous glance at her clipboard spoke volumes. Was this about kickbacks? I recorded the exchange on my camera, adding it to my notebook. That night, Linda texted, "City's investigating Brenda's driveway for runoff violations. Anonymous kip." My tip. Brenda's SUV circled later, her flash snapping my pavers. Why was she so frantic? Was it the money or something bigger in Victor's books? As the spring breeze carried the scent of fresh earth, I knew this rebellion was just the start. How far would Brenda go to protect her secrets?
What happens when you peel back the layers of a neighborhood dictator's rules and find a web of theft staring back? That's the bombshell I uncovered after Brenda Hargrove's driveway scam crumbled, revealing her HOA as a personal piggy bank for her and Victor. After the sirens, deck defiance, Halloween glow-up, Whiskers leash farce, and our paver rebellion, I thought we'd turned the tide. But when I demanded the HOA's financials, the truth poured out like oil from a leaky engine. Embezzlement, fake contracts, and a deficit that could bankrupt us all. Brenda wasn't just a tyrant, she was a thief. But what desperate secrets would she unleash to keep her ledger locked away? Summer heat baked Oak Ridge meadows, the air shimmering with the scent of cut grass and barbecue smoke, but tension simmered hotter than the asphalt we'd just repaved. My driveway's eco-tiles gleamed, a symbol of our resistance victory, while the deck stood firm, its string lights ready for evening hangs. Whiskers, cleared of Brenda's pet charges, dozed on the porch, oblivious to the storm brewing. My notebook, overflowing with evidence of fake fines, neighbor complaints, and camera footage, was fueled by suspicions of Victor's accounting. Linda Malone's paralegal tip, "Follow the money," had me hooked. State law required HOA transparency. Residents could request records with notice. I drafted a formal demand for 3 years of financials, budgets, contracts, minutes, citing the bylaws Brenda twisted like pretzels. Emily, my cop daughter who'd shut down Brenda's 911 call, reviewed it. "Solid, Dad. They have 30 days or it's legal trouble." I mailed it certified, the envelope heavy with anticipation. Brenda called that afternoon, her voice brittle over the phone. "This is harassment, Jenkins. The records contain sensitive data protected by board privilege." Privilege, like she was a CEO, not a suburban busybody. "Show me the bylaw," I echoed my deck standoff. She stammered, "It's implied in fiduciary duties," then hung up. She stonewalled for 28 days, but Linda sent a demand on law firm letterhead. The documents arrived in a thick envelope, reeking of fresh ink and secrets. I spread them across my kitchen table, the cedar scent from the deck wafting in as I pored over line items. The HOA was hemorrhaging. $25,000 deficit over 18 months, propped up by fines from Brenda's fake rules. A $40,000 pavement upgrade contract went to Victor's brother-in-law's firm for work never done. Our streets were potholed as ever.
$18,000 for pet safety initiatives vanished into thin air, no receipts. Victor's firm pocketed 15% of every fine, explaining the escalating mandates. But the gut punch. Our liability insurance lapsed 3 months ago due to unpaid premiums. If someone slipped on ice, we'd all be liable. Brenda's fines weren't just harassment, they funded her embezzlement. I cross-checked with the Sycamore resistance. Mrs. Callahan's light fine matched a budget administrative fee. The Garcia's pumpkin penalty tied to seasonal oversight. Linda whistled over coffee. This is fraud. Victor's family vendors, no bids, inflated costs. Tom Malone nodded. My union days taught me corrupt bosses cookbooks to cover theft. I copied everything, securing sets in my safe, Linda's office, and Emily's precinct. The state AG's HOA fraud division perked up at my anonymous tip, requesting docs. But dread crept in. Brenda was cornered. Her desperation from the driveway investigation boiling over. What would she do if she learned I'd uncovered her theft? Weaponize more false reports, like the sirens? Or something worse? I texted the resistance, emergency meet at my place, bring chairs and courage. 10 neighbors gathered on my deck, the evening sun casting long shadows as I unveiled the ledger. Linda presented timelines. Fines spiked after insurance lapsed, contracts funneled to Victor's kin. Mr. Peterson calculated, we've paid $12,000 in bogus fines this year alone. Outrage rippled, but so did resolve. We planned. Halt fine payments, pool into a legal fund, $9,000 quick. Linda to petition emergency elections. Brenda skipped them for years. Tip the AG fully. As stars twinkled, mirroring the deck's lights, Brenda's SUV circled, her silhouette watching. My cameras captured it, adding it to the notebook. She wasn't just power-hungry, she was criminal, and exposure loomed. What desperate act would she pull next? The ledger was open, but the war was far from over.
What do you get when a group of fed-up neighbors turns a backyard deck into a war room against a corrupt HOA queen? A rebellion that could topple Brenda Hargrove's empire, that's what. The woman who called the cops on my deck, fined my lights and cat, mandated scam driveways, and hid embezzlement in her ledgers. After unveiling her financial fraud, I called an emergency meet on my deck, expecting a few allies. Instead, 15 showed, armed with stories and resolve, transforming Sycamore Lane's whispers into a roar. But as we plotted elections and AG complaints, Brenda lurked in the shadows. What desperate stunt would she pull to silence us before we exposed her completely? The late summer evening draped Oak Ridge meadows in a golden haze, the air thick with the scent of grilled burgers and cut grass, but the atmosphere on my deck crackled with urgency. The cedar planks, still defying Brenda's fines, creaked under the weight of folding chairs as neighbors gathered. The Sycamore resistance, born from text chats, strengthened by Halloween's glow, pet defenses, and paver triumphs. My notebook, bulging with ledger revelations, lay open on the picnic table beside stacks of copied financials. Whiskers wove through legs, his purr a counterpoint to the tension, while Lisa's memory lingered in the string lights, twinkling overhead like stars of hope. I stood at the railing, coffee mug in hand, the bitter steam grounding me as 15 faces, Mrs. Callahan, the Malones, Mr. Peterson, the Garcias, and more, settled in. What I'm about to show you will make your blood boil, I said, echoing Emily's warning. She's done this before. I walked them through the bombshells, the $40,000 phantom pavement contract to Victor's kin, the vanished pet fees, the lapsed insurance propped by our bogus fines. Linda Malone, paralegal extraordinaire, tapped the docs. Systematic embezzlement. Victor's firm skims 15% of every penalty. Deck fines, lights, pets, driveways. They've stolen thousands. Outrage rippled. Mrs. Callahan slammed her fist. My $75 light fine funded their scam. Tom Malone, the ex-firefighter, growled. Union taught me, corrupt leaders fall when workers unite. Mr. Peterson, the engineer, calculated. Deficit hits $25,000. Without our fines, they'd be bankrupt. Stories poured out. The Garcia's $150 pumpkin hit, Peterson's $300 goldfish nonsense, each tying to Victor's padded budgets. Linda revealed, bylaws require open meetings. Brenda's held secret sessions for years, violating state law. We brainstormed over lemonade, the citrus tang cutting the heat. Plan 1, divert fine payments to a legal fund, $10,000 pooled quickly. 2, Linda's forensic audit pro bono to nail the fraud for the AG. 3, petition emergency elections. Brenda skipped votes, invalidated her presidency. 4, demand insurance restoration or sue the management company. My mechanic instincts kicked in. Document everything. Calls, notices, meetings. Corrupt folks create their own evidence. We set up an encrypted chat, pings echoing like battle drums, sharing photos of Brenda's surveillance. Rotation meetings, next at Malone's to dodge infiltration. Linda warned, keep calendars, this could go legal. But patience was key, as I'd learned in shop disputes. Brenda's sloppiness, fake rules, trespassing on cameras would undo her. We're not destroying her out of spite, I said, Lisa's gentle spirit guiding me. We're reclaiming our community from thieves. As dusk fell, cars crunched gravel, neighbors departing with purpose, but Brenda's Mercedes idled at the corner, her silhouette watching, captured on my cameras. My gut twisted. Cornered animals lash out. What would she do? False reports like the sirens? Or worse? The ledger exposed her crimes, but her desperation could turn deadly. The backyard council was formed, but the real fight was just igniting.
What does a cornered HOA tyrant do when her embezzlement empire starts crumbling? She strikes back with shadows and lies. That's Brenda Hargrove, the queen who called the cops on my deck, fined my lights and cat, mandated scam driveways, and hid theft in her ledgers, now unleashing a midnight campaign of smears and sabotage. After our backyard council plotted her downfall, I thought we'd have time to build our case. Instead, Brenda went nuclear, filing false reports and hiring spies, her desperation turning Sycamore Lane into a battlefield of paranoia. But when her PI tipped off Emily, I realized this wasn't just harassment, it was a pattern spanning years. What lengths would Brenda go for to protect her secrets? And who else had she destroyed before? The moon hung low over Oak Ridge Meadows, casting silvery shadows on the manicured lawns, but sleep eluded me as Brenda's Mercedes had circled our council meet, her headlights a warning. My deck, the heart of our resistance, creaked under my pacing boots, Whiskers curling at my feet with a soft purr that belied the storm. The notebook, chronicling police showdowns, accounting suspicions, deck wars, glowing defiance, pet farces, paver triumphs, and ledger revelations, now felt like a target. Linda's audit was underway, the AG tipped, elections petitioned, but Brenda was cornered, and desperate animals bite. It started with social media whispers. I wasn't big on Facebook, but Sophie, my law student daughter, insisted I check the Oak Ridge group page. Brenda had painted me as a subversive agitator, twisting our Halloween lights into an extremist plot and our pavers into environmental sabotage. Comments flooded. Jenkins is destroying property values. But resistance members countered. Mrs. Callahan posted her fine receipts, and Tom Malone shared budget discrepancies. Brenda's narrative cracked, but she wasn't done. 3 days later, a false police report landed. Brenda claimed I'd threatened her near the mailboxes, demanding she back off or else. My cameras proved otherwise. I'd been home, grilling on the deck. Emily called, her cop voice steady. Dad, heads up, complaint filed. Can't interfere, but document more. This echoed the sirens, Brenda's signature false emergencies. City inspectors swarmed next, noise complaints for my lawnmower at noon, zoning violations for illegal meetings, even chemical dumping for watering plants. Rick Gonzalez, a union buddy from my mechanic days, inspected. 18 complaints this month, Robert, all bogus. She's abusing the system. 18. Like the fines in the ledger, it screamed pattern. Brenda called my old shop, alleging intimidation and demanding they revoke my certifications. The rep laughed.
She's claiming you're running a neighborhood syndicate. We know better. But the nuclear bomb. Brenda and Victor hired a PI to dig dirt. Finances, Lisa's death, my kids' records. The PI, Jake Harlan, an ex-cop, recognized Emily's name from the reports. He called her. "Detective Jenkins, your folks hired me to surveil your dad. Thought you should know." Jake spilled. Brenda's history spanned 3 neighborhood fake rules, harassment, PIs when resistance victims resisted. Identical playbook. Fines to cover theft, then escalate to break them. Files showed her targeting widows like me, forcing sales to Victor's real estate pals. Emily forwarded the evidence, tying to Linda's audit. Brenda's behavior turned erratic. Dawn trash inspections, measuring sprinklers, logging licenses, captured on our cameras, shared in the encrypted chat. My union experience warned, desperate management scorches earth. Brenda's moves exposed her to felonies, false reports, harassment. But as my phone buzzed with resistance updates, a chill settled. She was unraveling, and unraveling tyrants are dangerous. What if she targeted Emily or the kids? The notebook grew, but so did the stakes. Brenda's dead-of-night desperation was her undoing, but how far would she push before snapping?
When a desperate HOA tyrant feels the walls closing in, what does she do? She calls a kangaroo court to crush her enemies, hoping to silence the rebellion before it buries her. Brenda Hargrove, mastermind of sirens, deck fines, light penalties, cat harassment, driveway scams, and embezzlement, thought she could expel me from Oak Ridge Meadows with a sham vote. After our council exposed her ledger and her midnight harassment went nuclear, I expected her to fight dirty. But when the clubhouse meeting turned into a public unraveling and Emily stepped in with cuffs, I realized Brenda's empire wasn't just crumbling, it was about to crash. What final act of desperation would she pull as her secrets spilled for all to see? The late August heat clung to Oak Ridge Meadows, the air heavy with humidity and the buzz of cicadas, but the community clubhouse was packed with tension thicker than summer fog. My deck, the spark of this war, stood firm, its string lights ready for another evening. Whiskers, cleared of Brenda's leash law nonsense, napped on the porch, while my notebook, bulging with evidence of sirens, grief, paver triumphs, ledger revelations, council plans, and PI bombshells, held the weight of our fight. Brenda's false reports and smears, it only galvanized the Sycamore resistance, now 20 strong, ready for her emergency expulsion meeting to oust me for community endangerment. I walked into the clubhouse, the scent of stale coffee and cheap air freshener hitting me as 40 neighbors filled folding chairs. Brenda stood at a podium, her blazer crisp despite the sweat beading on her forehead, Victor fidgeting beside her with his accountant's tie askew. Her charts, labeled Jenkins violations, listed my deck, lights, whiskers, and pavers as subversive acts. "Robert Jenkins threatens our harmony," she declared, her voice shrill as the sirens, waving fake rules. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others, like Mrs. Callahan and Tom Malone, exchanging knowing glances. I stood, holding copies of the ledger. "Brenda, let's talk real threats," I said, my mechanic's calm masking my pulse. "Your $40,000 pavement contract to Victor's kin, never done. $18,000 pet fees, gone. No insurance, leaving us liable. You and Victor have been skimming our dues." I passed out budget pages, each line tying to fines for decks, lights, pets, pavers. Linda Malone, paralegal sharp, added, "State AG's investigating. Fraud's a felony." The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, Brenda's face paling faster than her HOA Queen Mercedes in moonlight. She slammed her clipboard, shrieking, "This is a conspiracy!" and dialed 911, claiming a mob threat. The crowd froze, remembering the sirens. Within minutes, cruisers rolled in, lights flashing through the clubhouse windows. Emily stepped to the door, badge gleaming, her smirk back. "Mrs. Hargrove, another false report?" she said, voice steel. 19 this year, all documented. That's felony misuse of emergency services." She stammered, He's inciting violence." But neighbors waved their fine receipts, lights, pets, pavers, proof of her pattern. Emily cuffed Brenda mid-rant, Victor slinking back as the second officer read rights. The crowd cheered. A reporter from the local paper, tipped by Linda, scribbling furiously. The AG's probe, fueled by our tip, charged fraud. Brenda's false calls added harassment. We refunded $12,000 in fines, elected a new board, Mrs. Callahan as president, and started a community fund for repairs. Months later, the Hargroves' McMansion sold. Their empire dust. My deck stood, Lisa's memory alive in its lights, as Sycamore Lane bloomed into a real neighborhood. But as Emily drove off, Brenda's glare from the cruiser lingered. Had we caught all her secrets, or was there more to her reign? The notebook closed, but the question didn't. Tyrants fall, but what shadows do they leave?
How far does a tyrant fall when her empire of lies crumbles under the weight of truth? Brenda Hargrove, the HOA queen who unleashed sirens on my deck, fined my lights, targeted my cat, forced scam driveways, stole from our dues, and smeared my name, thought she could outrun justice with one last desperate act. After the clubhouse showdown exposed her fraud and landed her in cuffs, I expected Sycamore Lane to breathe easily. But as Emily hauled Brenda away and the neighborhood reclaimed its heart, whispers of her final scheme lingered, a shadow that made me wonder, had we truly ended her reign, or was one last secret waiting to strike? The clubhouse air still buzzed with the showdown's aftermath, the scent of stale coffee and sweat mingling as neighbors lingered, their voices a mix of triumph and disbelief. My deck, the spark of this war, stood proud in my yard, its string lights ready to glow again. Whiskers, free of Brenda's leash law nonsense, lounged on the porch, his purr a quiet victory. My notebook, thick with accounts of sirens, grief, paver rebellions, ledger revelations, council plans, and PI bombshells, now hold the final entries. Brenda's false 911 call, her arrest, and our $12,000 refund. But the weight of her glare from the cruiser chilled me. Emily, my detective daughter who'd shut down Brenda's first 911 stunt, led her to the cruiser, cuffs glinting in dusk. Brenda's blazer was crumpled, her platinum hair fraying, but her eyes burned with defiance as she hissed, "This isn't over, Jenkins." Victor, her accountant husband, slunk to their Mercedes HOA Queen plates, mocking her fall. The crowd, 40 neighbors from Mrs. Callahan to the Garcias, cheered as sirens faded, a stark contrast to the earlier chaos. Linda Malone, our paralegal hero, clutched the ledger copies, whispering, "The AG's moving fast. Fraud, harassment, felony misuse. Brenda's done." But done wasn't clean. The next morning I found a slashed tire on my truck, the cut too precise for vandals. My cameras caught a hooded figure at 2 a.m. No face, but Brenda's floral perfume lingered near the driveway, tying to our patrols. Tom Malone reported spray paint on his pavers. Resistance traitor. Mrs. Callahan's mailbox, an ally from the light fines, was bashed. The encrypted chat lit up. Neighbors reported petty sabotage, all after Brenda's arrest. Emily called. "Dad, we're tracing her calls from jail. She's got a burner phone contacting someone. Stay sharp." Jake Harlan, the PI who tipped Emily, met me at a diner, the greasy air heavy with secrets. "Brenda's done this before," he said, echoing Emily's warning. Files showed her forcing sales in 2 towns, targeting widows like me, using fines to drive them out for Victor's real estate cronies. Her burner calls? To a lawyer known for shady HOA defenses. "She's planning something," Jake warned, "a countersuit, maybe claiming defamation." My gut twisted. Brenda's empire was ashes, but her spite could still burn. The resistance met at my deck, now a symbol of victory. Linda unveiled the AG's indictment, $50,000 embezzled, 19 false reports, harassment charges. We elected Mrs. Callahan president, restored insurance, and planned a community garden with refunded fines. But Brenda's sabotage lingered. Cameras caught her lawyers snooping, eyeing my house. Was she after revenge or hiding one last ledger secret? I added the tire slash to my notebook, Lisa's strength in my veins. The cuffs were on, but Brenda's shadow loomed. Had we won, or was her final act waiting in the dark?
What happens when a neighborhood topples a tyrant and reclaims its soul?
Brenda Hargrove's empire, built on screaming sirens, fake fines, and stolen dues, lay in ruins after her arrest, but the scars of her reign lingered like ghosts on Sycamore Lane. From the deck that sparked this war to the lights, cat, and pavers she tried to crush, our fight wasn't just about rules, it was about saving the dream Lisa and I built. As Oak Ridge Meadows bloomed anew, I closed my notebook, but one question haunted me. Could we heal the wounds Brenda left, or would another shadow rise to test our unity? Join me as we rebuild and share your own HOA horror stories to keep the fight alive. Fall swept into Oak Ridge Meadows with a crisp breeze, the scent of apples and wood smoke softening the air. My deck, the heart of our rebellion, glowed with string lights, now a beacon of victory. Whiskers, free from Brenda's leash lawn nonsense, basked in the sun, his orange fur bright against the cedar. My notebook, a chronicle of police showdowns, grief, driveway triumphs, financial revelations, resistance meetings, vicious smears, and a tense clubhouse confrontation, closed with Brenda's arrest. She faced fraud, harassment, and felony misuse charges. Her HOA Queen Mercedes sold alongside her McMansion. The neighborhood exhaled. Mrs. Callahan, now president, led our first open meeting in years, the clubhouse alive with laughter instead of Brenda's venom. We used refunded fines, $12,000 strong, to restore insurance and plant a community garden, roses nodding to Lisa's memory. Linda Malone's audit uncovered $60,000 in embezzlement tied to Victor's family vendors. The state AG's case sealed Brenda's fate. 3 years probation, restitution, and a ban from HOA rolls. Victor's accounting license hung under review, his real estate cronies scattered like roaches. Brenda's sabotage lingered like a bitter aftertaste. My slashed tire, Tom Malone's spray-painted pavers, Mrs. Callahan's bashed mailbox, all traced to a lackey hired via Brenda's burner phone, caught on my cameras. Emily, my detective daughter who'd cuffed Brenda, confirmed. Her lawyer's countersuit flopped. No evidence, just spite. Jake, the private investigator, sent files on Brenda's past. 2 towns, same playbook. Fines, harassment, forced sales. She'd targeted widows like me, banking on grief to break us. Lisa's strength, woven through every stand, kept me fighting. We rebuilt. Sycamore Lane transforming. The Garcias hosted a fall festival, kids carving pumpkins where Brenda's finds once loomed. Mr. Peterson's goldfish pond became a garden fountain, mocking her absurdity. My driveway pavers sparkled, a testament to our cooperative. The resistance chat buzzed with plans, block parties, a dog park, no more fake rules. But as I grilled on the deck, Whiskers purring and reflected, this fight started with a deck, but it was about community, neighbors uniting against tyranny. From text chats to council meetings. My notebook, now archived, held our story. Every fine, every lie, every win. If another Brenda arises, we'll be ready. Cameras, bylaws, unity. Want to hear more HOA horror stories or share your own? Subscribe to Beyond the HOA on YouTube. Comment your tales and join our fight to reclaim neighborhoods from petty tyrants.